my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. This is me desperately trying to redeem myself because the last time I reviewed this author's work, I set myself up for failure. So, today I am reviewing Songs of Insurrection by JC Kang. I have reviewed two other books by this author, Masters of Deception and Crown of the Sundered Empire. He writes in a very large interconnected universe, and these books in themselves have multiple layered stories going. They are each the first in their series. However, there's also a through line running through them through the character of, and I'm gonna get paranoid here, Jie. I get paranoid because there's another character in the book that says her name wrong and she constantly talks about it. So I'm like, crap, am I that character? But while each of these books is the first in the series, you can also follow Jie's story through, like, I believe this one first, figured that one out, then Masters of Deception, then Crown of the Sundered Empire. That is not the order I read these in. I read Masters of Deception, then Crown of the Sundered Empire, then this one. And I seriously screwed up reading Crown of the Sundered Empire, the previous JC Kang work I had read, because I'm like, I'm gonna read this super long, super dense, high fantasy with a ton of countries and cultures and political machinations in like 2 days. That's fine. It was not fine. And I even said in that review, I was very confused and I got a lot of stuff wrong. And I found out after I got even more stuff wrong. Up to and including the extent that I will probably one day do a re-review because I screwed up so much on that one. So this one, I was like, all right, I'm going to get this right. I read this book at a snail's pace compared to my regular reading speed. On a normal day, I read 100 pages of a given book. Maybe more if I'm in the mood. This one, I said, nope, I am only reading, give or take, 10% of the Kindle reading speed. And it took me 10 days. Or technically 9? No, 10. Dates are weird. Anyway, I went as slowly as possible to make sure that I got it. And even then, still a little bit confused. But what is the story about? This is a story about a young princess, Kaya, who is basically a political pawn and is known for not being that attractive. However, she's known for having a beautiful voice and dreams of reviving the dragon song, this old musical singing magic that was said to literally defeat dragons. And this strange new foreign prince comes asking for her help in his homeland because her country, which is based on China, I don't know what era China, but old-timey China, basically is funding their enemies with gunpowder without meaning to. And on the side, you have Jie, who runs through the entire series, who is slowly uncovering that their Black Lotus clan, their clan of secret spies, has a traitor, someone who is teaching non-clan members the clan ways and going off and doing their own thing, and so she must figure out what that is. And throughout the other books in the series, or the other books in this, it's really hard to explain, but the other books that she pops up in, that is what she's doing. She is on the trail of this traitor trying to figure out what happens next. And I was really happy to have a very standard character in Princess Kaya because she's your teenage princess protagonist that dreams of being more. However, and what I really liked here is she still feels very set in the culture. And a lot of those young princess dreams of being more type stories, they feel like they weren't even raised in the setting, if that makes sense, where they're so busy being like, I'm not like other girls, and so blatantly pushing back on all the mores of the world around them that it feels like they were taken from another book and just plopped in this world. But Kaya and basically all the other characters really feel like they've grown up in this world, and she follows all the cultural mores because she is a princess and she's supposed to, even though she has feelings. Admittedly, JC Kang did a really good job of making Prince Hardeep, who I believe is from a country that is supposed to be an India-like country. I actually majorly screwed up in Crown of the Sundered Empire one of the ways, which is where I had been told that JC Kang writes Asian-inspired fantasy. He is Asian American. I believe he practices Chinese medicine. But I didn't realize that that story was actually based on a lot of Western kingdoms. No, this one is almost entirely Asian-inspired kingdoms, save for a couple side characters that are really just there to be like Easter eggs for another story. Like, oh, there's Prince Aaron. You meet him in this one. Like, they're not that important to the story as a whole. But in general, I appreciated having such a standard protagonist because I had a very hard time, as usual, with the world building. And maybe it's my bad because I keep expecting it to be easy because I've read multiple books now. But the thing that JC Kang loves to do is bring in not just a couple countries, but like 5 or 6 countries. 5 or 6 countries with different politics and different cultures, and then like different sects and like regions in those countries that also have like their own things going on. It's a lot. And this is definitely one of those series in general, like the wider work that he does, is something that you really need to love, those super heavy political machinations and the spying and the vying for power. And it's not that I don't like that, it's just that, like, trying to figure out who's selling gunpowder to who and how that affects this third country, and then how that might hint at a rebellion at this country's particular region. It's a lot. The one thing I do say, though, is I appreciate that it has a lot of drama without going over the top, without going to shock factor. So if you are the kind of person that likes the idea of Game of Thrones without the, you know, ultra sexual assaultness that tends to come along with that series, this might be the one for you. Admittedly, there is one point where nothing happens, nothing is done on the page, but there is some allusions or threats of sexual assault that, again, nothing happens on the page. You should theoretically be fine if you have those triggers, unless it is a very, well, just go in knowing that. But I really appreciated, again, how much the world felt lived in and fleshed out. I mostly just focused on Kathai, I believe. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. It's definitely a China stand-in, but I don't know how to say fantasy names half the time. And I definitely liked Kaya's arc and standing up for herself and finding her purpose, and also making gigantic mistakes. Gigantic, oh my god, what are you doing mistakes. The only thing that I would say that I struggled with was the very end, past the climactic scene. The climactic scene was fantastic. I actually was tempted to like keep reading past the normal pages I'd set myself a day because it was getting so good, but no, I forced myself. I was going to be a good kid. It seemed like the last couple chapters were really trying to pull out a ton of last second plot twists. Now, there was one that I really liked and definitely drives the story forward. However, there was like 2 other ones where I was like, we had the big one. We had the big plot twist that will drive the sequel. So it felt like there were all these like several little add-in insert scenes really trying to make you want that sequel, like really badly. And admittedly, I didn't need much more than like the first one. In general, though, there is also at the very end of this book some prelude chapters, which is what they're titled as in the book, which is basically like a couple chapters to span this book and the sequel to be like, okay, Bridget. So those were interesting, and again set up the sequel in a fairly interesting way. I appreciated that the ending wasn't exactly what I expected it to be, and in general, I'm still not the biggest high fantasy person, but I appreciated how deeply this was entrenched in the culture. I actually, part of my reading it slow and doing it correctly was, I would stop regularly to Google instruments, the names of instruments or the names of like different kinds of architecture or what have you, to be like, make sure I had everything in my mind correctly, because I really wanted to do this one right. I still need to correct the last one. Anyway, again, this is a very, very dense, lore deep, intricate high fantasy. However, if you are that person that loves a connected universe, he regularly adds in so many other references to so many other things, and each book will have Easter eggs to all the other books once you start reading them, and that's kind of fun to look at and be like, ooh, wait, I know this part because he's from this book, and then this happens, and it's a lot of fun to look for the Easter eggs in this giant connected universe, and JC Kang has written so much in this universe, multiple series, I think a couple of standalone books. Like, if you get into this and you're better at figuring out the world building than me, it's gonna be a lot of fun to get to explore every nook and cranny in this place. I'm gonna keep going at it at a snail's pace, though. I think I just need to accept myself. I am much more sci-fi than high fantasy. I just need to come to grips with that, and I will keep reading this series, but definitely at a slower pace. So JC, whenever you want to add in whatever book you would like me to read next, because again, I have now begun like 3 separate series in this universe. I hope that I can eventually wrap my head around it. There's a reason that I am very loath to say yes to most high fantasy review requests. But that brings me to my next point. I am open again to review requests, but I am only open for a limited number of slots. So, because I get annoyed and overloading myself with a ton and then having to close all the time, I am setting out a rule. Whenever I get to 15 books on my review list, I will then close and reopen again once I only have 5. So, as of filming this, do not take this as gospel, as of filming this, I will have 8 slots free on my to review list. Feel free to send me an email if you would like. My email will be down in the description below. I will also have my review policy down there. Please give that a read through. It answers a lot of questions and saves us a lot of time. B2W totally forgot to say I gave it 4 stars. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.